What's happening, people? Welcome back to the Athletes to Athletes podcast for our third season. To get things started in our first conversation of 2023, I'm learning about the competitive world of baton twirling from 7-time world gold medalist and former University of Iowa Golden Girl Chelsea Potter. We dig into her career, the reason behind taking that path, and how twirling led her to a full scholarship. In addition to bringing you even more incredible insight in the new year, we're also developing new and exciting ways for you all to interact with the A2A system. One of those ways is through our new mobile app that is currently available in the App Store by searching Athletes to Athletes. You'll be able to access our learning materials and our great content, which includes this podcast. So again, welcome back to the A2A podcast. And without further ado, let's get to today's conversation with Chelsea Potter. And as always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's conversation. We're back to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. This is our first show of season 3. I'm really excited to get into this conversation today. And I'm talking with Chelsea Potter, and it is probably one of the most interesting sports stories that I have come across. And in my 15 years, I've gotten a chance to cover field hockey, and, wrestling is my number one thing, and football, but never, ever have I heard of anyone from your background. I'll let you intro that here in a second, but I'm really happy that you're joining me today, and I'm interested in your story. But first, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and your sport and give us a little bit of feedback about you.
Thank you so much. I'm actually incredibly honored to be asked to be a part of this, just because no one ever knows about my sport, which is baton twirling. And yes, it is a sport. We're not the majorettes that you see on the sidelines at football games. We are sometimes, but when we're talking about competitive baton twirling, we're talking about something completely different. I've been involved in the sport since I was 3 years old. My mom is a world-renowned baton twirling coach herself, and that's basically how I got started. She would work in a room off the side of our house, and I would hear, the dropping of the metal stick, and I was very curious about that. So I immediately, wanted to spend more time with my mom, and I was like, I want to go in, and I've been doing it ever since. There are state, regional, national, and international competitions for baton twirlers. I've been competing internationally since the age of 10. I've competed all over the world, from England to Belgium. I've traveled to Peru. I've competed in Japan. And I've actually had the pleasure of teaching and coaching baton twirling in many different countries as well. When I was a senior in high school, I auditioned to become the feature baton twirler for my college, the University of Iowa, and I was very fortunate to be named the Hawkeye Golden Girl with the Hawkeye Marching Band. It's the only position in the country that offers a full tuition scholarship to their baton twirler, so it paid for my undergraduate career. I actually twirled my first year of grad school, and I was able to be on the staff of the University of Iowa Marching Band as a second-year graduate student, which was an amazing experience. Since that time, I have remained involved in competitive twirling by becoming a National Baton Twirling Association registered judge. I've also served as a member of the communications team for the International Baton Twirling Federation, and I was also on staff for the University of Buffalo Thunder of the East Marching Band for 3 years. So baton twirling is a major part of my life. I still perform when I can, not all that often. I'm currently 7 months pregnant, and the last time I actually performed, I was 3 months pregnant, and that was pretty hard. So, I try to pick up a baton every once in a while, but I'm still teaching. I teach a recreational group once a week, which is an absolute blast. And I do a lot of choreography for students all across the United States and Canada. Try to do as much travel teaching as I can, because that's the fun stuff. Yeah. Like I said, a very extensive resume that when, we have our prep meetings and our forms and stuff that you guys fill out before we get in, and just seeing all the different places that you've been able to go based on baton twirling was the more interesting part for me, because you always hear about, basketball players going and playing overseas, right. Baseball players going and playing overseas. I've had a chance to go to Russia as a journalist and cover wrestling. So you hear it a lot in other sports, but you never
really think that there's a different, like a correlation for, something as niche as baton twirling. Now, one of the things that you did mention was there is a difference between the competitive aspect of it and being out on the football field during halftime. Can you kind of explain what those differences are? And I mean, feel free to go as nuanced as you would like to, because I actually love hearing the details behind things.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear, I'm not knocking the people who perform on a college football field. That was a major part of my career, and was one of the highlights of my entire life, was performing at Iowa with the marching band at halftime. But it's a different skill set. When you're looking at competitive twirling, these are athletes. These are people that are doing weight training in the gym. They're doing, working on their speed, they're working on their stamina. A lot of twirlers run or do spin classes to keep their fitness up outside of twirling. You have people who are doing 2-a-days. Granted, we know a lot more about fitness now than when I was competing. I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s were probably the high times of my competitive career up through 2015. And I was just starting to get into those sorts of things at the later end of my career. But now, we know so much more about keeping a balance between flexibility and strength. And so you see a lot of people, doing everything I mentioned in addition to yoga, to keep their bodies in alignment as they're doing these kind of crazy gymnastic and dancing moves in combination with tossing and, manipulating the baton around their bodies. When it comes to how a competition is set up, there are different events, there are different age groups, there are different levels. Every twirler starts out as a novice twirler. There's also beginner, intermediate, advanced, and elite level competitions. And something people find very interesting about baton is that there are actually multiple organizations. So it usually depends on where you grow up in the country, which organization you're more likely to associate with. My part of the world, Western New York, is predominantly NBTA, the National Baton Twirling Association. So that is my primary organization. But there is another large organization called the United States Twirling Association, USTA. And we each actually have our own separate world championships with a larger umbrella organization organizing those championships. And only in the past 15 or so years have we been trying to merge those two organizations together, because I'm sure you can imagine there's different rules, there's different judging styles, there's different twirling styles. I actually competed in both organizations for about 4 to 5 years of my career, and that's something that's given me a unique perspective as we attempt to bring the two organizations together, because we've realized if we ever have any hope of becoming recognized by the International Olympic Committee, we need to present a unified front. So that's, again, you told me to get nuanced, but this could go on for a while, so I don't want to get too crazy into it, but it is, like I said, those different styles, the different rules, different score sheets and scoring systems. And when you're looking at a twirler who performs for their high school or performs for their college, there's a lot more what we would refer to as flash type twirling. This is really fast movements, holding the baton by the end, swinging it as fast as you can, doing multiple batons. People are, impressed by 2, 3, 4 batons, lighting batons on fire. They're not the same apparatus, by the way. You need a completely different type of baton in order to light the ends on fire. So it's not like if you've ever seen Miss Congeniality, the ends don't just spontaneously combust. I promise. You have to smoke them and do all kinds of things and take safety precautions. But those kinds of things, really high tosses, anything that's showy, anything that's going to grab the attention of an audience is more what you're going to be seeing on a field, because you're dealing with the elements, especially in football stadiums. As a former football player, it gets really windy down there on the field. And when we have an apparatus that's so light in weight and you're throwing it 40, 50 feet in the air, it can be caught by a gust and, knock out a trombone or, something you don't want happening. So you have to learn how to battle those elements. Whereas being in front of a judge, there are certain categories that you're trying to fit into. If we look at an MBTA score sheet, it's organized into 5 different captions for each event. Things like speed, gracefulness and coordination, showmanship is even a part of it. Variety and difficulty are all things that you're working towards. And showmanship is one thing that, in recent years, as we've tried to merge, we're deciding whether that's something that is really important. Like if you watch a gymnast floor routine, yes, they do put in that kind of, strong posture, and there are some facial expressions, but when they line up for a pass, there's nothing going on in that face except determination.
Yeah.
In baton twirling, you're expected to keep a smile on your face for the entirety of your routine, and your attitude, finesse, and performance is actually 20 points of your score. So that is a little bit of a difference. It's a little bit closer to ice skating, figure skating, you might say, because there are artistic elements of that sport. When it comes to the different events, the traditional baton twirling event is called a solo. It's about a 2-minute long routine where you have one baton, and you have to, like I said, fit into those 5 categories. My best event was probably 2 baton. It's a very similar event. It's a little bit shorter time limit where you have 2 batons. There is 3 baton. There's also an event called freestyle, which is where you get to pick your own music, which has more of a similarity to figure skating and the floor routine in gymnastics. One organization does allow gymnastics, one does not. As we look towards that merger, it looks like both are going to allow gymnastics in the competition. But we always want people to remember that we're not gymnasts, we're baton twirlers. It's about the manipulation of the baton, how high you can throw it, how easily you can catch it, all the different ways you can catch it under your leg, behind your head, behind your back, backhand. It's actually a penalty to catch it with 2 hands. It's the same penalty as dropping the baton, which I've always thought was really interesting. Like you need to catch it with 1 hand. You need to show that you have that much control over the baton, that you're not just kind of groping around for the baton in midair. So freestyle was another one of my best events because you get to pick your own music. You get to show off your personality and who you are as a person beyond just a plain smile on your face. You get to do a little bit more acting. Yeah. There are, of course, team routines as well. There are large teams, small teams, core. I've seen teams with as many as 50 or so people on those teams. There's also a duet competition. I was very lucky to have 2 duet partners throughout the course of my career, and I attended the World Championships with both of those partners and received the gold medal for both of our routines, which was an incredible experience. So, there's a lot to it. And that's something we're struggling with as a sport, is to figure out which parts of that giant, smorgasbord of events and things and rules, which parts are going to appeal to an audience. Because as it stands, you go to a baton competition, they can be 12 to 15 hours long, and no average sports fan is going to want to sit that long. Yeah, that's a long time. We don't want to do it, so no one else wants to come watch us do it either. Oh yeah. Trust me, as a young wrestler, I know exactly how those very long days. You weigh in the morning, you're not done till 7:30 at night, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So those long days can get to you. But for you, you've been a coach since you were, I think you said, about 15 years old. Yeah. How do you become a coach at such a young age? And then was it hard for you to kind of be coached as you grew throughout your career because you had already been doing it yourself? Well, it's not like I immediately became an expert coach. This was a small dipping the toe in the deep end type of thing. I was at a competition in Long Island, and a woman approached me after watching my routine and asked if I would give her daughter a roll lesson. And to explain what a roll is, I should have brought a baton with me so I could show you what I'm talking about. I know listeners can't see it, but it's something that doesn't leave your body. So you would put it, for instance, on your neck or on your shoulder or along the course of your arm, and it doesn't actually leave. You're moving your arm to kind of glue the baton to you as it rolls around your neck and your shoulders, your arms, sometimes even your legs, but rolls are predominantly done in the upper half of the body. And what's really funny about this story is that I thought that I was terrible at rolls. I literally thought they were my worst thing. And I talked to my mom, who was my coach, and I was like, why does she want this lesson? And my mom was like, well, it's because of me. I did a really good job of covering up the fact that you don't know what you're doing. And she's like, no. You know what you're doing. You can work with this person. And so it was a half-hour lesson. It was the first time I'd ever made money for doing something. I didn't have a job at the time. I was only 15 years old. So it was a really big deal for me. And after that lesson was over, which of course I was terrified the entire time, I was like, that was cool. I really liked doing that.
Yeah.
And shortly thereafter, we have a couple local recreation teams or local teams that will go to nationals, but are more lower level, like beginner level type twirlers, that asked me to come in and give a few spot lessons. I started teaching at camps. A lot of places will have summer camps for baton twirlers, and they'll have different levels, kids who are just starting out, kids who are preparing for nationals. They might call it like a kids to nationals group, where the primary focus for them is practicing at the camp, whereas other students are looking for new material to bring back to their coaches. A lot of coaches will go and attend these camps to learn more for their teaching styles. And I really started getting into that around the age of 17 or 18. Because they want collegiate twirlers to come in. So they'll say, here's Chelsea. My name was Chelsea Russell at the time. Chelsea Russell from the University of Iowa. She's a former national and world champion. She's going to be your clinician today. And, you really hit the ground running in those situations because you don't know the people you're working with. They have all different levels. You might have 20 kids in front of you, one of whom is not doing a proper release, which when you release it needs to be off your thumb. A lot of people aren't doing proper thumb tosses. Some people have been trained incorrectly from the time that they started, and others are incredibly adept and will pick up on what you're saying immediately. So I'm a school teacher now, and those experiences were invaluable to me as a school teacher because you're constantly trying to differentiate your material and meet each kid where their individual needs lie. So like I said, I didn't start as this, amazing coach that was getting all these jobs or doing all these kinds of things, but those experiences were integral in my success as a competitive twirler because so often you learn things when you're 3, 4, 5 years old and they just become a part of your body. They become a part of your psyche. You just know how to do them. And then when you go back and try to figure out how to actually teach someone to do it, you realize you don't know the mechanics. Yeah. Your body's just been doing the mechanics. You've been going like on autopilot this whole time. And something I loved doing when I was a kid, and this is very nerdy, but I loved watching my mom teach. And this was the early 90s. She did everything in a notebook. Nothing was filmed. We didn't have cell phones, so she wasn't recording everything. And I would sometimes get to be the timer. We have time limits in baton twirling, so I would hold the timer and I would have to count how many times my mom's student's leg was bent or the toe was unpointed or how many drops they had. I would be basically marking on a score sheet from the time that I was 4 or 5 years old. And my mom is a phenomenal coach. The way her mind works, I'm in awe of it to this day. I watch her teach and I'm just like, I didn't see anything wrong with that. And there she goes, oh, your pinky on that one part at the third, part of your routine was the tiniest bit out. Could you go back and let's take a look at that? That's a stupid example, but just the things, the intricacy of her students' routines, the uniqueness and complexity of her routines. So getting to learn from the best was a huge part of who I was as a competitive twirler and certainly who I am as a coach today. And to address your question about whether it was hard to be coached after having that experience as a coach at a young age, I actually think the opposite is true. I think that it made me a better student. It's always hard. My mom was my coach, and I've just spoken very highly of her, but our relationship was really difficult when I was a kid. It was hard for me to separate the coach from my mom. Yeah. Especially, as a preteen, preteens can't do that. Yeah. That was really hard. I was talking walking back, I was frustrated. I wanted to go hang out with my friends. I didn't want to be practicing baton every day. I didn't want to be I felt like I was trapped in the gym, and I had to miss, sleepovers and parties and whatever, because I was traveling for baton, all these amazing opportunities that I look back now on and think like, oh my God, thank God that I was doing that. But, at the time it's really hard when you're 12. I really feel like my mom and I, when it comes to baton, the two of us are, this sounds conceited, but I think we're one of the best teams around. Yeah. I think when the two of us are together and we're working, we've had a team in the past called Crescendo that we've brought to international competition twice. I was on it the first time, and then the second time I was just serving in a coaching and choreography role. We had a team of twirlers who lived in all different states, and we didn't get to practice more than once a month. We actually started our routine, I think, in February of that year, and we competed. I think when did we qualify? I don't know. It was sometime that year, and we competed in August. And out of all of the American teams, there were 3 American teams there. We were the only ones to make the finals, and this was not a team of the most elite twirlers in the country. This was our students. We kind of cobbled it together, and they were phenomenal twirlers, but we weren't people who were working together in the gym every single day, day in, day out for hours. And I owe so much of that to my mom's coaching style and what she brings to the table. And when we work together, it's a completely different level of coaching than we can be on our own. And that same was true when I was still competing. Like I said, my last few years of competing, I was maybe 24, 25 years old, and I had a full-time job at that point. I was already a teacher, and I wasn't planning on competing that year, but my team was invited, or we'd qualified unbeknownst to us for this new international competition. It was the first of its kind, actually. And I remember her telling me, saying, you made it to the Grand Prix, and I'd had kind of a disappointing final nationals. And I was like, Mom, I don't want to do it. Like, I have a job. I really don't want to. And I'm so glad I made that decision to go. Our practice sessions were completely different. I would do a routine, I would choreograph something, and I would look to her as more of a consultant. And I would say, where do I need to address things? Like, what's not working here? What can I change? And, she was still my primary coach, but I had a lot more say in what I was doing. Yeah. And my attitude was better. Granted, I was a 24-year-old woman at this point, but it was a completely different thing. Even when I was in college and I was younger, ages 19 to 21, she lived in New York and I lived in Iowa, and this was before FaceTime was really a thing. Like, I don't think I had an iPhone then. So I was recording. I had a flip camera. Do you remember those? Yeah. They're really tiny. Really tiny. A flip camera, and I had this little googly thing that I could hook up to a basketball net, and I would videotape myself and send it to her. But I really had to coach myself at that point and really go to her more for critiques and for lessons, as opposed to every single day her watching me practice. I had to really become more self-reliant. So, that was a really long litany of things that I'm telling you I did, but without those things, I wouldn't be who I am today, and kind of finding my own way. And unfortunately, I don't get to coach as much now as I want to. And in Iowa, I had about 30 students when I was living there. And then when I moved back to New York, my mom's so good. She's the one with all the students. And like I said, I had a full-time job. I was kind of hustling on the side. I was doing everything. I was doing makeup for weddings. I was doing anything you can imagine I was doing.
Trying to stay busy.
Yeah, exactly. And make money. Because at the time, it's hard to become a teacher in New York when you get your license somewhere else. So I was not hired as a teacher right away. I was a teacher aide, so I was only working part-time. That's how I found my job at the dance/baton twirling studio, where I actually still work to this day. And I have been very honored in my career to be asked by my mom to do her students' choreography for their freestyle routines. So I've been doing that actually since I was very young, because like I said, my mom is a baton twirling mastermind. But when it comes to the choreographical aspect of things, that's just not her favorite thing to do. She can do it and she's great at it, but she has been entrusting me with that job of doing her students' choreography for a number of years now. So I feel very lucky that I still get to work as a team with my mom in something that I think we're really good at together.
Yeah. So when, and you talked about being involved from such a young age and, keeping time or noticing different things on a score sheet for your mom when you were very young. As athletes, we always have a plan for ourselves. Did you always think, was it always part of your plan to get a scholarship from a school for baton twirling? Was it always your plan to go the international route? Or was it something that, you had seen your mom doing, you wanted to be a part of it, and then everything else started to progress as you got better?
So my mom kept folders of all of my goals and all the tricks that I was working on, and she would make them at the beginning of every twirling season, which the twirling season is incredibly long. It goes from September to August. So it's all year round. August usually only happens if you make the world championships, but so a lot of people end in July with our nationals, but you don't get a lot of time off. So at the beginning of the season in September, she would whip out a notebook and she would say, what are your top 5 things that you're working for? Mm-hmm. What are your top 5 tricks that you want to catch this year? And it was funny to see what my goals were as a kid. They weren't super title driven, like, titles that you would win. They were more personal beasts that I was trying to tackle. Like there's a trick called a spin. So you toss it up and your body rotates 360 degrees around. And I was trying to catch a 5 spin, at a certain age, those kind of things, like things that were proving difficult to me. But my number one goal as a 5-year-old was to be on the cover of Drum Major magazine, which is a baton twirling publication that actually still exists. It's like on newspaper print, and they would put the winner of certain events like the Grand National Twirling Championships, the National Collegiate Champion. There's a competition called Miss Major Out of America, and I so desperately wanted to be Miss Major Out of America. I wanted a crown, and I wanted to be on the cover of the magazine. And I was like, Mom, that's going to be me. I'm going to be there. That's what I'm going to do. And she was like, yeah, okay. I was actually born, I was pigeon-toed. I would trip myself over my own feet. I was incredibly uncoordinated. My mom didn't want to coach me when I was a kid. So my first lesson was with my babysitter at the time, who was one of her students. There were no thoughts. I mean, my mom was a national champion herself. Mm-hmm. She was also Miss New York 1979, was the first baton twirler to win the Talent Award in Miss America. She was a very accomplished twirler. So I think she thought, this is going to be hard for her. Like she has to, come out of my shadow and that kind of thing. But I went on to win Miss Major Out of America 4 times in my career, and I won Grand National Twirling Championships 5 times in my career. And I was on the cover of that magazine a number of times. Yeah. So and every time, it's the dumbest thing. I'm sure people want it, but it's not anyone's main goal. But every time I was on the cover, it just meant so much to me because I know how much I wanted it when I was a kid and how much that symbolized all of my hard work. It wasn't about the picture. It was about the hard work that went into it. And I figured that out beyond the age of 5. But when it came to being a collegiate twirler, I actually didn't know that much about it. In Western New York, marching band is not really a thing. Like the high school where I work, they do 1 field performance a year, and it's for homecoming, and they just stand on the field and play, which is really, really fun. But I didn't have a lot of footage for college auditions and things like that. I didn't know about Iowa's full scholarship until I was a junior in high school and was looking at places to audition. And my dad actually found out about it. And I talked to the person who was the feature twirler before me at a competition in Las Vegas that year. So collegiate twirling was never really on the radar for me. I knew that I wanted to leave the state of New York for college. I knew that I wanted to perform, but I didn't really know what I was looking for or what I was looking towards. And then by the time I got there, it was literally the greatest thing in the world. I was over the moon and beside myself. But for me growing up, it was about, how can I best myself? How can I, that was a big thing that my mom always taught me was you're not competing against your competitors. You're competing against the score sheet. You're competing against yourself. And I wanted the highest score. I wanted the least the fewest penalties. I wanted, my mom to get the highest variety and difficulty score, because in my opinion, that's the coach's job, right? When you have the highest variety and the best, the most challenging difficulty. And then my 3 captions at the bottom, speed, control, and smoothness, gracefulness, and showmanship. Like that was my job. How could I, bolster her scores? Because I know hers are always going to be high. So how can I best her there or match her there?
Yeah.
Competing internationally was huge for me. The first time that I went to the World Championships in the year 2000, they were in Birmingham, England. That was a game changer for me. I was like, they were held every 3 years at that time. And I was like, how can I do this every time? The next time I go, I'm going to make every single event. I only made 2 at my first World Championships, and there were 5 that I could make. And I was like, that's it. That's the goal. It's not just going to Worlds. It's every single event. And I will never forget, I was devastated. I was the alternate for only one. I made it for every other event. I was the alternate. I'd actually pulled my hamstring 2 months before nationals, so we had to restructure all of my routines right before the qualifier. And of course, it was the one routine that required the most flexibility, the ones I couldn't use my legs for. And I was still the alternate, and I was so disappointed. And then the girl in 3rd place dropped out, so I got to go. I did every event at that World Championship. So I don't know. I was hungry for it.
Yeah.
I wanted every opportunity to get to perform. I wanted every opportunity to show the world what I could do, and that I was consistently improving. And I don't know. Goal setting has always been just a huge part of my journey. My mom fostered that when I was a little kid, and I do it in every arena of my life, whether it's my own physical fitness now, whether it's as a coach or as a teacher or a mentor to kids. Goal setting is huge for me. I feel like lost if I don't have a goal like ready to go or up on my wall somewhere, something to follow.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's interesting, right? Because, as young athletes, you talk to 5-year-old me and I'm like, I'm going to go to the NFL, right? Like that's everybody's goal. You want to be a professional. So for you obviously had somebody in your house who was a professional and somebody who could guide you through each one of those things as you continue to progress. And you kind of talked about it a little bit of like your attitude obviously got better. So, the relationship with your mom got a lot better. And now you guys are a great tandem when it comes to coaching. But as you guys progressed, how did you kind of see her mentality shifting for you as a performer and for her as a coach? How did you guys become that more cohesive unit? Because a lot of people, when you're being coached by a parent, like you said, it's hard to differentiate coach from parent. So how did you start to gel a little bit more in order to get to where you've gotten to?
It all shifted the year I turned 16. I remember a marked difference in what was happening. I had just moved up to the senior division. So the senior division is 16 plus, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. There did used to be a top age limit for twirlers. You couldn't be any older than 24 years old. So it made a little bit more sense that back then. I think they're looking at actually changing the age levels now. There's been some like adult level competitions. Actually, my final competition I competed in, I was in the adult level as opposed to just the senior or teenage division. But my biggest goal near that point of my career was to win the senior Miss Majorette of America competition, because they kind of preside over nationals and get to do a lot of events. They travel around the country. It's sort of like Miss America. It's way less of a pageant. So I struggle making that comparison, but because it's all twirling, right? You're doing all twirling events. It's just this title, and you do get a crown. So I guess that is one very large similarity.
Yeah.
But that was my first year of eligibility for that title, and I was going to win. There was no doubt in my mind. I was like, this is it for me. I'm going to work the hardest I've ever worked. I'm going to drive myself to the gym. I'm going to be the youngest person to ever win this event. Watch me. And there was just no question in my mind. My mom was like, okay, let's go. And that was the first year that I wasn't being dragged to practice. And I think that's what changed everything. It was just this shift in my mind that I wanted something so badly, and I knew that the only way I would get it would be by putting every ounce of myself and my determination into what I did. And that year at Nationals were some of the best performances I've ever given. I had a no drop in my routine for that particular event. I just was really on fire, and it was because of that drive, and because we worked so well together, and because we weren't constantly butting heads and at each other. And have there been times since then when we butt heads? 1,000%. And I'm sure even that year, but I remember talking to my mom after I won the event that I wanted to win, and her just saying, like, this was you. You turned this around. The fact that you realized what it would take to get something and you put everything into it, like that's what made the difference. It wasn't me this time, it was you. And that really stuck with me. And as I went through college, I actually I retired, quote unquote. They used to call me the Brett Favre of Baton Twirling, which is not great now. He's done some really messed up things. Yeah. But at the time we didn't know about that. It was more just the fact that he kept coming back. Yeah. Because I was done at age 16. I was like, okay, I won the youngest age in the division. I'm done. I can die happy now. This is the best thing that's ever happened. And my senior year of high school, I didn't compete at all, which I don't regret that at all. It was a wonderful experience I got to have. My senior year, I did all these drama club things with dance, like things I never would have had the opportunity to do, except I had to audition for college positions, which was really tough when you're not competing, you're not practicing every single day. It was tough to get back into that mindset. And the second I got out on the field, my freshman year of college, I was like, ooh, yeah, I'm not done. I need to do more of this. Yeah. So that was when I decided to go for my last world championships. And that was where more of that collaboration with my mom and more of that mental shift had to really take place, because like I said, we lived, a 13-hour drive away from each other. And we found ways to make it through that. I decided a couple years later, I retired again somewhere in there for about a couple months. But a couple years down the line, I had always wanted to be a part of a twirling team, a competitive team. And I was like, let's do it. Let's start one. My mom was like, okay, if you say so. So we started, polling people from my mom's students, people that I knew, that had lived near us for a long time, but other people coming from as far away as Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. We really ran the gamut when it came to twirlers, because we were like, how are we going to put this team together? We don't have enough people in Western New York. We don't have enough people in Iowa to do this. And that was just a crazy experience. We had never done it before. I'd done a ton of choreography, but not for 8 twirlers at once, especially not 8 elite level twirlers. We didn't have a lot of expectations going into that. Our first year, it was a world qualifying year, and I broke my foot the month before nationals. So I had to pull myself out of the team, which was devastating. I couldn't qualify for worlds that year because I couldn't compete. That taught me, that's a whole other story, but that taught me so much about mental toughness and how to handle that. And again, made me better at coaching and made me a better partner for my mom, because I couldn't physically make a difference on the team, which was infuriating and upsetting and miserable. Yeah. And my sister was competing at the time. My sister's 8 years younger than I am. So, when there's an 8-year difference between you and your sibling, it's hard to be close, especially when you move away for college. That was kind of the year when my sister Bailey and I really became a team. I would take her to practice, and I would sit on the floor because I couldn't do anything else. And I would watch her compete, and I kind of served as her fake coach for nationals when my mom couldn't step in. And, it got to the point where I came back the next year, decided I wanted to continue competing with Crescendo, with the team. I did that for, 4 or 5 more years. And the culmination of that was qualifying for this International Grand Prix in 2015. And when you make the finals, the performance order is in reverse order of placement. So whoever goes in with the highest amount of points, they perform last. And you're all warming up kind of in this pen. It's like a backstage sort of area. And I am literally going to get choked up saying this out loud. I don't think I've ever said this out loud to anyone besides my mom, which is kind of crazy, but I was warming up with the team, and I had a solo trick in the beginning, so I was going over that trick and making sure I had it in my brain. And there were 3 teams left, and it was us and the two teams from Japan. And I know a lot of people don't know a lot about baton twirling, but Japan is the country of the best athletes of twirlers. They are phenomenal. Baton twirling is offered like in school, like a choice like band or orchestra. So it's widely respected. When I went there for the World Championships, there were 8,000 people at our finals. It was standing room only. People had signs with our names on that, like it's things I'd never seen before. So when I tell you that it was us, this team that we cobbled together, and the 2 Japanese teams left, my mom just took me for a second. It was about to be my last routine of my entire twirling career, for real this time. I was really retiring after this. And she looked at me and she was like, Chelsea, I just stop doing that trick. And I was like, why? And she was like, I need you to look at where you are, and I need you to look at who is standing here with you. Did you ever think it would be like this? Like, did you ever in a million years, when you called me and said, let's start a team, like, did you think we would get to this point? And hell no, I did not.
Yeah.
So, I really did not. And that was a moment of perspective for me, and a moment with my mom that I will cherish for the rest of my life, because it was like every minute in the gym, every second of self-doubt, every injury, coming back from a broken foot and just figuring it out. And, we didn't get the bronze medal in the finals. We did really well. I think we had 2 or 3 drops, but we got 4th by a couple points or a few tenths of a point, whatever it was, to the other American team. But it didn't matter, because that practice, that warm-up session was everything to me. And I think, like I said, the shift with my mom and me happened when I was 16, and I'm so thankful for that shift because it led to that moment. It led to working together and having that kind of working relationship, in addition to our mother-daughter relationship that, got me one of the best moments in my career.
That's amazing. And it brings me perfectly to our 5 questions portion. Kind of, like I said, it's kind of rapid fire. So the first question for you is, what was the first competition that you won where it really gave you that epiphany that baton twirling was for you?
That's tough. Because I don't know if it was a competition.
Maybe it was just a moment. Maybe it was a practice or something.
Yeah. I think it had to be, it was probably at nationals. We have this thing called AYOP, which is in South Bend, Indiana, every year on the campus of Notre Dame. And I think it was more just watching champions compete. It wasn't about me. It was about watching the seniors go out and do these crazy, mind-boggling tricks and catch them in the most intricate places, and doing all these crazy things. And I was like, that is what I'm going to do that. I'm going to be the one that people are watching. And I knew baton was for me, then. And that only strengthened with every competition I went to. Again, I keep bringing it up, but I went to Japan in 2004, and watching the Japanese team compete and everything that they did, they had a team chiropractor. I was like, what? They had a team a person who made their lunches. And I was like, well, this is not what baton is in America. We got to make this happen here. So every competition had someone like that. It was never about what I won pushing me forward. It was watching what other people had and that I knew I could achieve. That made me realize baton was for me.
Interesting. That's an incredible moment. Question 2 is, how old were you when you had your first competition?
3 or 4. I think it was like marching. Like there's this John Philip Sousa march song. You hear it on the 4th of July. You'd know it if you heard it. But you hold your baton and you march in a little square. And I was going in the square and someone knocked my baton out of my hand. You like don't drop in this routine because you're just marching.
Yeah.
And apparently, like I went the wrong way. I was terrible. 3 or 4.
That's great. Did you ever play any other sports, or was baton your sport? Was that it for you?
Oh, I was an athletic disaster. I was not coordinated. I did very poorly in PE class. I loved to dance. I'm actually way more athletic now. I'm really, really proud to say, because when I was younger, it was bad. I was picked last for every team in gym, and the only time I actually won Gym Student of the Month because they have a dance unit at my school. So I was doing my line and square dancing, and that's what I got recognized for in my high school, which, I can still say I was PE student of the month. But I did play JV volleyball for a year. I think I was a freshman in high school, and my name is Chelsea, and the coach thought my name was Cheryl for the entire season. So I just went with that, and I was Cheryl, and everyone called me Cheryl. That's how bad I was. And I just sat the bench, did a lot of scorekeeping. And then in college, my junior year, I discovered Club Ultimate Frisbee. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I really had a team experience, and was kind of part of the impetus of me wanting to start a twirling team, because I was like, oh, this is a sense of community. This is really cool. I've never had this before. And we drove from Iowa to Georgia to Texas to North Carolina. We drove all over to compete. And actually, I wasn't very good, but our team was very good, and they made nationals one of the years that I was a member of the team. I didn't play a single point at nationals, but I was a very good cheerleader. And, that taught me a lot about, physical endurance and weight training and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it was a little niche sport too. So it was, there were some similarities in that community to the twirling community. And, I still like to pick up a disc every once in a while.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
So last question before we get to some advice. Why Iowa? Was Iowa the only school that was offering this scholarship, or was it just something about Iowa that made you want to go there?
There are some other schools that offer, sometimes they offer full tuition, like the University of Louisville. Mm-hmm. I am pretty positive it's full tuition now, but at the time there was one feature twirler and there were 3, you could call them feature twirlers, but they were more like served more of a majorette role. And so I was like, okay, I really want to be the only one. Or if if I don't get the main position, I don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. Like I think that I can do this, so I want to, prove that I can do this. Hawaii also, for a number of years, has offered a full tuition to their twirler, but Iowa is far enough from New York. I did not think that I could handle. I mean, Hawaii sounds great, but when you are that cut off from your family on the East Coast, I just did not think that was for me. I applied to 9 schools. Maybe it was 10. It was a lot. I applied to a number of colleges: Florida State, Michigan, Texas, all over. UB, which is my local University of Buffalo. Mm-hmm. But Iowa is really smart because they hold their audition first. And my top schools at the time were probably Michigan and Texas. Mm-hmm. That was what I was really deciding between. And University of Southern California. That was way up there for me. I was originally planning on going into acting or performance. So I really, wanted to be on the West Coast and be in LA. My aunt's from there. And I was like, Dad, no way am I going to Iowa? It's cold. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's just corn. Like I was so ridiculous about it. And, I still worked really hard. I like to win, if you couldn't tell.
Of course.
About me from this conversation, but I was like, I'm still going to be the best one. Like I still have to be offered the position. And, this is little 17-year-old me, like trying to psych myself up. And I went, and we arrived in the middle of a hailstorm. And so I was being pelted with ice chunks as I disembarked from the plane. And I was like, yeah, Mom, no, this is not happening. My mom was also very ill, had like a 103 fever, was miserable. She looked at me, she's like, we never should have come here. Like, this is ridiculous. This was all before my audition, right? We were so negative about, like, it just was not in the cards for me. And I went and I crushed the audition, and I had a 40-minute long interview with a panel of 13 judges, and it was an open audition. So the public was there, the press was there, and I was like, wait a second, hold up. The press is here? Like, what am I auditioning for? You know, like, that was like a very eye-opening moment for me of like, oh, this is for real. Like, this could be the rest of my life. Like, it was just a moment where it clicked, and I went from that like negative, I'm never going to do this, to, oh, this is respect for twirling. And I have not been giving this position respect. Like, I have been, you know, downplaying it in my head. And I was lucky enough to be awarded the position. And I said, okay, well, I need to, you know, get through my other auditions. I'll let you know. And he's like, oh no, it's Saturday. We need to know on Monday. You need to tell us on Monday. And at that point, our flight home had gotten canceled. We got stuck there for an extra 2 days. We couldn't really do a lot of touring because of the snow and the hail and the crazy weather. And I was just like, I don't know. I am feeling this pull that I didn't expect, you know, before I got here. And maybe this is for me. And my dad really wanted me to do it. He's like, full tuition. How do you say no to that? You know, like, he's the one like paying the bills over here. He's like, you can't say no. What are you, crazy? But I just had that moment of, okay, this really is for me. And I, you know, my mentality completely changed at that point. It was like, this place is cool. This is what I was meant to do. I can't believe how much they respect the sport of baton twirling. I just couldn't believe it. I'd never encountered that before. And it became very much not about me, but about my sport. And little did I know, they had one of the best writing schools in the country. So as an English major, it ended up working out exactly as it was meant to for me. So yeah, Iowa was never in the cards for me. Nor was teaching. And both happen. Yeah.
So, I mean, the right thing always finds you, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
So this is how I always love to conclude these things with everyone's story. They always come across some nugget of wisdom, whether it's something a coach told them, or maybe it's just some epiphany that you have at some point in your life. But what is, you know, a piece of advice that you either tell your students, that you either tell, you know, somebody that you're coaching, that you feel that everyone should know that really has resonated with you?
So I want to reiterate something that I already said, at least briefly. And it's the piece of advice that my mom gave me throughout my career, which is, you are not against your competitors. You are your biggest competitor. You are against yourself. You have to focus on yourself. You have to think constantly about how you can improve, because it's not comparative, right? You're never going to be the best comparatively if you are not solely the best at what you do. So that was the best piece of advice given to me by someone else. I do know I already said that. But if you ask me for an epiphany that I had, it was definitely when I broke my foot and I couldn't compete, and I had to watch my biggest competitors qualify for the world team. I had to watch my team go on without me. I had to watch my little sister as she prepared to do something that I really wanted to do myself, and I was physically stopped from doing it. And I realized in that moment that if you are not loving what you are doing, you should not be doing it. And there is a way to find joy again in something that you have lost the joy for through the years. Because there were definitely moments, you know, I told you I retired, quote unquote, a bunch of times from twirling, because in those moments I didn't love it, or I'd achieved a goal I wanted to achieve, or I decided I was done for, you know, reason XYZ. And I don't regret any of those times. It was hard coming back every single time. It was always a big challenge. I was getting older. It was harder to get my stamina back. But in those moments when I quit and stopped, it allowed me to realize yet again what I loved about this sport and what made it so special to me and why I wanted to be a part of it. And I owed that to myself to find that joy and to want to participate in it again, because why would I be going out and working hard and winning something and taking that away maybe from someone else who truly enjoyed it? I know that sounds kind of crazy. Like, it's not about who loves it the most. That's not who wins. Yeah. But that to me became the most important part of my journey when I was around 21 years old. I realized, like, I have to love this and I need to find a way to love this. And if I don't, then I shouldn't be doing it. And I think it's okay to admit that to yourself, that there are times where you don't love it. And there are also times where you can be so mad at what you're doing and hate your sport and love it at the same time.
Yeah.
You hate it because it means the most to you. And as long as that's not an unhealthy, toxic type of relationship, I think that shows you love it more, right? The fact that you can feel so passionate about something and get so frustrated with something that, and yet still come back to it and love it so much. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah. You got to love it. Even when you hate it, you still love it. And that's a great piece of wisdom. Now, before I let you go, is there anything that you would like to leave us with? Would you like to kind of give any sort of shout outs or, let us know what we should be looking for when it comes to baton twirling? As we're now, I'm completely immersed in this, right? And I looked up videos as you told me to, and I watched a ton of videos after we had our prep meeting. But is there something where we should be watching for? Should we be watching for baton twirling to be in the Olympics someday? What is out there for baton that we should be looking for next?
Our first merged competition is coming up this coming August in Liverpool, England. That will be the first International Baton Twirling Federation World Championships. So the first combined World Championships of both organizations, and that is sure to be a showdown. They've already done the qualifications for both organizations, so we know who will be there. And it's been a long road with COVID. It was supposed to happen a couple years ago, and that was when I was on the communications team for it, and I've since removed myself from that. This is my second kid. I just kind of have a lot going on, but I was so excited to be a part of that because I think it's such a big deal for our sport, in that we really do hope that you will see us in the Olympics someday. And this competition, like I said, August in Liverpool, England, it's being hosted by the IBTF, the International Baton Twirling Federation. Definitely be on the lookout for that. They have an Instagram page. I believe it's called at IBTF Baton Twirling. I will look that up if I'm wrong, and you can put it in the, the podcast notes, but definitely follow that on Instagram. I do have a TikTok. It's at PotterCLR. If you want to follow me, it's mostly cat videos and baton twirling. So if you're interested in either of those things, I actually went viral. I have 580,000 views of me choreographing the musical at my school, which is The Addams Family, and I'm choreographing it very pregnant. So that's my claim to fame right now. It just looks a little bit ridiculous, but it's always a good time. I'm always posting videos of just goofy choreography that I come up with, so that's really fun. But those are the two big things right now.
That's awesome. I love it. But Chelsea, this has been an awesome conversation. You're super fun. I loved getting to hear about your resume and kind of going through all the years that you've been coaching and performing and retiring and unretiring and just, performing while pregnant. So, it's been amazing. I appreciate you taking some time out. I'm going to let you get through the rest of your school day, but we'll definitely be talking again soon. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. To engage with everything the A2A platform has to offer, go download our new app by searching Athletes to Athletes in the App Store. You can check out our educational material, and you'll ensure you don't miss a new episode of the A2A podcast. So again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.